Hello there, and welcome to my addendum video to the Finch West LRT video I posted last week. Now, I had actually recorded audio for this video like the day after I posted that video, but a lot happened in a really short amount of time in regards to the line, so a lot of what I said in that video was immediately out of date. So I took some time to let things settle down, and now I'm going to attempt to do the video now. It has been a while since I've done a video like this, and the channel has grown a bit, so if you're not familiar with the addendum format, it's just an unscripted video of mine where I talk about something that I didn't include in the main video, either because I didn't want to, or I just didn't have the time to. And in this case, this video is going to focus more on my personal experience with the line, having ridden it on opening day, and everything that has happened since and what the potential future of the line could be. So like a lot of people, I rid the line on opening day. I wasn't there for the opening ceremonies, but I did get there around 10:15, 10:30 in the morning. And I guess I'll start with the things that I liked. First of all, I do like the look of the Citadis Spirit trains. I think they look nice. The interior is clean. It's kind of what I expected of a modern LRT. I like the general look of the stations. You know, they're very clean. They're very modern. I do wish we would get away from this bare concrete wall habit that we've gotten into because, well, yes, I understand that it's cheaper. We all know that those walls are going to look terrible in like 5 years when they're covered in water damage. Another thing I liked was the information displays, which I know this is probably a very minor thing, but I did like it because they're very simple. They tell you what you need to know. It's very hard to screw it up. And I bring this up because you compare this to some of the information displays you see on the rest of the subway network, which are these big TVs that, you know, show a very small amount of information on like the bottom fifth of the screen, and the rest of it is just CP24 and ads. And I get why the TTC does it, but it's not very good. And let's not even talk about the information displays on the buses and how much wasted space there is on those. On the topic of wayfinding, on my way to the Finch West LRT, I noticed that the TTC had updated the TR trains to now display more information on the passenger information things at the end of each car. And now it displays things such as what side the doors will open on and connections at the stations. And these things are pretty much commonplace in most other civilized countries, and it's amazing that it took the TTC like 12 years to implement it onto their newest trains. Finally, another thing I really liked, which goes back to the design of the stations, is there's one specific area of Finch West Station when you're just walking from, it's the connecting point between the subway station and the LRT platform. This big 2-floor room, which has the ramp and the stairs in it. I think this room's like really cool looking, and I really like it. And when I look at the picture I took of it, it almost gives me like this liminal space vibe. I don't get it. Like if you were to remove all the people and give it that fluorescent tube hum, it looks like something that would be generated in the back rooms. Now, with all that out of the way, let's get into the things that I wasn't exactly impressed with when the line opened. First of all, I will admit up front that on my first trip from Finch West to Humber College, I chose probably the worst seat on the train. Like, there's this one seat, it's right in the corner of the articulated joint of the train, and there is no legroom in that space. And I say that as a guy who's not even very large. Like, I'm only 5'5", and even I was just thinking this is an awful seat to be sitting in. So I can't imagine what it would be like for someone who isn't as vertically challenged as I am. Now, on to the main issue that I think everyone's aware of. It's been talked about to death at this point, but, you know, I have to bring it up in this video because I experienced it too, and that is the speed of the line. It was very slow. The first trip from Finch West Humber College took an hour, and the return trip home took maybe like 50 minutes, which isn't any better in the grand scheme. One thing that I also noticed on the trip to Humber College was bunching. Like, there was an LRT right ahead of us, and it just makes no sense that this is happening. Like, this happens. This is something that, when it happens downtown on a mixed traffic streetcar line, you can sort of understand it because it is in mixed traffic. So it's at the mercy of whatever the car drivers are doing, and most of the time what they're doing isn't good. But for it to happen on a separated right-of-way line, yes, it's in the middle of the street, but the fact is it's still on its own right-of-way. And the fact that it's happening there is just terrible. Now, there are many reasons and reasons that this is happening, and really everyone deserves the blame for this. Part of the blame for this definitely goes with Toronto Transportation Services because they once again insist on not activating the transit signal priority that this line was built with. They've done this on St. Clair Harbourfront and Spadina as well. And every time they give a reason for it, it's complete and utter nonsense. The TTC also deserves a lot of blame for this because for whatever ungodly reason, they've decided to run this thing like it's a streetcar. And they've imposed their awful streetcar running practices on the line. And I don't need to go into that because if you've ridden one of our streetcars, you know what I'm talking about, how slow they've become, all in the name of quote-unquote safety. Even though I remember not even that long ago when I was in college going to George Brown, taking the 504 pretty much every day of the week, except weekends, of course. It wasn't this bad. The streetcars would fly through intersections and they would fly down the road. This is a very recent occurrence and I have no idea why it's happening. Now, on that topic, in the aftermath of the opening of the route, there was a lot of outrage and backlash over the slowness because, well, of course there would have to be. We've spent $3.5 billion on this line and it's slower than the bus because that is something that I saw when I was riding it, that we were getting bypassed by the shuttle bus, which is not what's supposed to happen. If your new rapid transit line is slower than the bus, then what the hell are you doing? But in the immediate aftermath, there was a lot of backlash because, there were a lot of politicians involved in the opening ceremony. Olivia Chow was there, Doug Ford. I'm not sure if he ridden it because, to be honest, he probably doesn't seem like a guy who rides public transit. He probably thinks it's beneath him. But it got the rightful backlash that it deserved. And now we're seeing the city of Toronto going through the motions of trying to correct this. Now, this is where I need to bring up the meeting that happened between the City of Toronto and the TTC board. And during this meeting, to summarize, the TTC essentially said that they can't really make many changes because of contractual obligations, because remember, this is a P3, a public-private partnership, which means that it's not just the TTC involved in this, it's also Metrolinx and a private group known as Mosaic Transit who is responsible for maintaining the line for 30 years. And according to the TTC, there are some contractual issues here to getting the line up to speed. Now, whether or not this is right or not, who knows? Because the province has disputed this, so right now we're just pointing the finger. Everyone's pointing the finger at each other. Now, if it is in fact true that there is some contractual nonsense going on here, then this is a disaster, because this is an even bigger disaster because it means that any change to this line has to go through some contractual amendment process. If that is in fact the case, then first of all, this also affects the Eglinton Crosstown because it's also a P3, but more importantly, this impacts the Ontario line because that's also a P3. And if it is indeed true that any changes to these lines require contractual amendments, then in my opinion, this should kill dead the idea of ever using a P3 again. Because P3s during the construction phase have risks, but if that risk now extends to the operational phase for 30 years, then this is horrendous. This is essentially the public transit equivalent of the Highway 407 contracts. We are essentially locked into these 30-year contracts where we barely control the line, and anything we want to change has to go through the private operator. Now, that of course assumes that there is a contractual issue and the TTC isn't either mistaken or just, covering up for their own incompetence. But time will tell how this plays out. But nonetheless, the current implementation of the Finch West LRT is not good. The idea on paper is sound because I go through that in the history of the line in the main video, that this is the proper mode of transit for the Finch corridor. But we have screwed it up at such a fundamental level. Without transit signal priority, you're getting caught at red lights and having to wait for cars to make left turns, which is another thing that was happening a lot when I rode the line, and I was pointing it out every time it happened because, I took my mom along for it because she wanted to see it. And every time we got caught at a red light, I'd point it out. Every time we had to wait for cars to make left turns, I would point it out because we are doing this ass backwards. The LRT should have priority first. It should clear the intersection first. Then the cars can make left turns. That's because that's how it works in more civilized countries, apparently. But the other issue at hand is the TTC's operations of the line because, like I said, they seem to be operating like a streetcar when it's not supposed to be. During testing, Metrolinx got the trains up to 60 kilometers per hour. So we know the line can operate that fast. So why the TTC has insisted on cutting the speed of the line in half, and in some cases probably even more so, makes no damn sense to me, beyond this crazy safety protocol that they've instituted in the past couple years that didn't exist not even 10 years ago. Okay, so another issue that I think is worth bringing up is the stop spacing on the line. Overall, I think the Finch West stop spacing is in general fine, although there are some issues. There are a couple stops on the line that really shouldn't be there. So I'm just going to go through the line and yeah, we'll just go stop by stop. So Finch West, obviously, that's the eastern terminus, sorry. Sentinel I think is fine. I believe this is Tobermory. Don't quote me on. Hold on, I should probably turn on the roads. Yeah, that's Tobermory. And then we get to the first questionable stop, and that's Driftwood, which is right here. I have no conceivable reason why this stop is here. It wasn't present in the original 2007 proposal. It was added in the 2008 revision, and I really don't know why. Like, if I measure this from platform to platform, this is about 457 meters, so 450 meters, which, yes, when the line was designed, it was supposed to have stop spacing between 400 and 600 meters. So 400 is the minimum, but the whole point of the minimum is that you don't want to be at the minimum unless you absolutely have to be. You generally want to be somewhere in the middle. And from the center of the Driftwood platform to, let's say, the center of the Jane platform, that's only 400. That's only 300 and let's say 350 to 400 meters. So this stop doesn't need to be here. It's right on the minimum stop spacing. And once again, the minimum isn't what you're aiming for unless you absolutely have to. And in my opinion, this isn't an area where you have to have the minimum stop spacing. That said, if we move on, Norfinch, I think this stop's definitely more responsible for the hospital and the nearby high school, because you have, I believe that's Westview Centennial Collegiate, I believe that's right there. So I can see the need for a stop here because they want the high school students. Then we have the stop at Signet and Arrow, which is another one where you can take it or leave it because Weston Road is not that far away. I can also see the stop at Weston becoming an interchange at some point because Metrolinx does have plans to build a stop at Finch Avenue for the Bolton Go line, should that ever be built. But going back to Signet and Arrow, this is another stop where, I'm ambivalent towards it. It doesn't really matter to me. Now, when we move down the line, we have the next stop, which is right here at Rumike, which, okay. And then we get to the Pearldale Duncanwoods disaster. In my opinion, I think the better play here would have just been to merge these two stops together and put it right here in the middle around Grace-Dale Boulevard out front of the plaza. Just because I don't think you need two stations for this one community. One in the middle probably would have done just well. Then we have the stop at Islington, which makes sense. We have a stop at Kipling, which makes sense. And then we get to the stop at Stevenson Road, another truly baffling decision. This stop was in the original 2007 proposal. It was called Silverstone Drive at the time. And then it was cut from the 2008 proposal, and it should have stayed cut. But for whatever reason, it was brought back. I don't know why this station was brought back. I can only assume it was political shenanigans. And maybe they thought, you know, this large community housing neighborhood in the area could benefit from it. But honestly, it's not that far from the stop at Albion Road or Kipling. Then we have the stop at Martin Grove, which makes sense. Besides, there's also 2 schools in this area. We have a Catholic school on this side, and this is a middle school on this side. I just don't remember their names off the top of my head. Oh, well, that says Henry Carr, so that's that mystery solved. And then we have the stop at Westmore, which is pretty much just here to serve Highway 27. Then the line goes underground briefly through this corner, which for some reason the speed limit here is posted to 10 kilometers per hour. I don't know if that's the rated speed of this corner or if the TTC is just being dumb here. And then finally you have the stop at Humber College, which pulls double duty, serving the college and Etobicoke General Hospital. So that's the stop spacing issue, and in my opinion, it's primarily 3 stops. It's Stevenson, which doesn't need to be there. Pearldale and Duncanwoods could have been merged, put out front of the plaza, and Driftwood doesn't need to be there. The stops at Norfinch and, the stop at Norfinch I'm going to keep there because there's a high school down the street, as I said, and there is this old hospital that's sort of kind of used. And the stop at Signet Arrow, you can take it or leave it. Now, while we're here, I guess I might as well just talk about an eastern extension of the route to Yonge Street, because there are also multiple stops proposed for that as well, and most of them I don't agree with. For example, there's supposed to be a stop at Alexton. I don't think that should be there. The stop at Chestwood is fine, and then remove the stop at Elness. So no stop at Elness, no stop at Alexton, keep the stop at Chestwood. This would leave about from Keele Street, that's about 1.1 kilometers, which, you know, it's actually probably the extreme end of, it's not even the extreme end, to be honest. Like, that's way beyond the stop spacing for the line, which is supposed to be 400 to 600 meters, but this one's just over a kilometer, but I don't see this really being any other way here. And then from Chestwood to Dufferin is about 900 meters. Stop at Dufferin, obviously. Wilmington sits about 516 meters. Personally, I would probably get rid of the stop at Wilmington, but I can understand why you might want to keep it. There's a proposed stop at Torresdale. Personally, I would actually put this stop just a bit further west near Robert Hicks Park. But I understand why that's not going to happen, because this area that I'm hovering around, this is actually on a hill. And I know the TTC doesn't want a stop with a gradient. So unfortunately, we got to put the stop here up on this flat surface at Torresdale, which means that this stop's only going to be about 600 meters from Bathurst Street, which honestly isn't too bad. Then we have the stop at Bathurst Street, obviously. And then there's supposed to be a stop at, I believe it's Finchhurst, and a stop at Edithvale. Now, what I would do is drop the stop at Finchhurst and Edithvale and instead put a stop here between Senlac and Granbrook Street. You know, just in this area, and wedge it between these 2 roads. This would put the stop about 1 kilometer from Bathurst Street and about a kilometer or so from Yonge Street. Now, there was also at one time a proposal in 2007 for a stop at Talbot Road. Now, that would be about 600 to 700 meters from the stop at Senlac, which is fine. And it's about 600 or so meters from Finch. So you could probably do that. Now, my issue with it is that the portal to Finch is just east of Edithvale, which is only about 300 meters away from the stop at Talbot. So you could make a case for the stop at Talbot and the stop at Senlac. We would just be replicating what the 2007 proposal was. Which, when you kind of think about it, the 2007 proposal pretty much had it right, except for the stop at Silverstone, and somehow we just kept making it worse with each subsequent revision. So yeah, that's pretty much how I would organize the stop spacing on the line going forward. And if, we had to remove some stops, definitely the stops at Stevenson, Duncan Woods, Pearldale, they can be merged, and the stop at Driftwood. And then cut down the stops on the eastern extension. Maybe a stop at Talbot, you can justify it either way. Certainly a stop at Senlac, stop at Bathurst, stop at Torresdale, stop at Dufferin. Do not put a stop at Wilmington. Stop at Chesswood, no stop at Alness or Alexton, and then just go straight to Keele Street. Now, another topic I do want to bring up is the topic of LRT versus BRT, because while we know that the Finch West corridor can't on its own support a light metro or a subway, there is often the discussion between LRT and BRT. Now, personally, I stand by my statement in the main video that I think LRT is the best fit for the corridor, just based off of current ridership and projected ridership. And that also holds true when you include potential extensions to, say, Yonge Street and the airport. And when you include those, because, for example, Metrolinx predicts that the extension to the airport could generate around 2,500 riders per hour. And then when you factor in an extension to Yonge and put that on top of the current projected ridership, it's easy to see that the Finch West line could easily hit 5,000, 6,000, maybe even 7,000 riders per hour, which is well within the comfort zone of an LRT, but beyond the capacity of a BRT, which the TTC puts at around 5,000 passengers per hour. So I do think that building an LRT now is definitely a good forward-thinking move to allow us to cope with potential future ridership, whereas if we built it as a BRT, yes, on paper you could convert it to an LRT later down the road, but at that point, once the route becomes crammed and you're having to essentially shut down the route and have buses running in mixed traffic while you put tracks down, you essentially have to ask yourself, why didn't we just do this in the first place if we knew this was going to happen? That said, I do believe that BRT does have a place in Toronto. It's just that I view it as a very different kind of tool to the way that some others may view it, and some of you may disagree with me on this. But I view BRT as a good way to move a lot of buses. And by extension, I guess that also means you would move a lot of people, but I have Photoshop open so I can help illustrate this a bit better what I'm talking about. And to do that, I'm going to talk about, a street out here in Scarborough, for example, Ellesmere Road, which on weekdays has about 5 different routes operating on it between UTSC and McCowan Road. You have the 95, you have the 995, the 38, the 938, and the 133. And all of these routes have different origins in the east, but they're all going to the same place in the west, and they're all going to McCowan Road, and they're all being funneled onto the same street. And this, in my opinion, is a good place where, BRT makes sense, because you have a lot of different buses being funneled onto the same road. And if you live on Ellesmere between UTSC and McCowan Road, you have arguably the best bus service in the GTA, because during weekday rush hours, it's a bus like every 2 to 3 minutes. So just for example, let's say, we have Ellesmere Road here. Don't mind my awful drawing. I haven't used my drawing tablet in years. So here comes some bad handwriting on my part. So here we have Ellesmere, and now 5 different routes, like I said, come down this road. You have the 133, which is coming from Malvern, and it's funneling onto Ellesmere to get to McCowan. You have the 95, which is coming from Port Union, and it's funneling onto Ellesmere. You have the 995, which is coming from UTSC, which is funneling onto Ellesmere. And then you have the 38 and the 938, which are coming from Rouge Hill. And these 2 routes are also funneling onto Ellesmere. And so you have all of these routes funneling onto Ellesmere to get to McCowan Road. And now you can also include the proposed extension of Durham's Dart bus, which may also one day end up on there to go to the Scarborough Town Center. And you can see how this could be a situation where there's a good case to be made for a BRT line, because you have currently 5 bus routes, maybe one day 6 bus routes, all funneling down Ellesmere. And it's a good place, and it would make sense to put bus lanes down the middle of the road, Highway 7 style, so you can get those buses out of mixed traffic. Now, of course, traffic on Ellesmere generally isn't the worst in Toronto, but it still makes sense to have all of these buses on their own dedicated lane, because that's a lot of buses running down the street, and getting them into their own lane means that, one, they don't have to deal with mixed traffic and can get to their destination faster, but at the same time, it also means that for car drivers, they don't have to deal with all of these buses clogging up a lane. And so that's where I see BRT is valuable. And you can find similar situations to this, say, on the old York University busway, which had a lot of different buses operating to York University. They were coming from different places, but they were all going to the same destination. And instead of having them, run along Finch, Keele, and Sentinel, you just put them on their own dedicated road. And the same thing is true for the Scarborough RT busway, where you have a bunch of different bus routes going from Scarborough Town Center to Kennedy, and right now they have to all shuffle on to Midland and Kennedy roads. And while they do have the dedicated bus lane there, it just makes more sense to give them their own private right-of-way between Kennedy and Ellesmere, so they don't have to deal with vehicular traffic or standard traffic lights in general at all. And so those are my general thoughts on the line, having ridden it, having done a round trip on the route when it opened, and, the things I liked and the things I didn't like. There are a couple things I do like. I like like I said, I like the look of the trains. The stations are fine. I wish we would stop with this bare concrete nonsense, but, that's not going away. And, there are aspects I like, but there are flaws to it, mostly in the operational department. And thankfully, many of these flaws can be fixed with proper political will, and it does seem like there is political will to fix these things. Eliminating stations is probably a harder sell, and I don't see that getting fixed anytime soon. But overall, I do stand by my belief that the Finch West line that LRT is the proper solution for the Finch West corridor. We just need to make it better. And so with that, I will end this addendum video. I don't know what my next video will be. It could very well be the Eglinton Crosstown video, and hopefully we've learned a thing or two before we open that. Because if that opens and it's just like the Finch West line, it's going to be an even bigger disaster. Because the Finch West line is a line that generally the construction of it went by relatively unnoticed. It flew by North American standards. Nothing really major happened. But the Eglinton Crosstown has been under construction for a long time now, and if it opens up in the same state that the Finch line did, it is going to be an absolute disaster. So hopefully we learn a couple lessons from the Finch line so that we don't repeat it with the Eglinton line, and don't repeat it with the Ontario line like 10 years from now, because remember, that's a P3 as well. So Lord knows what's going to happen there. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one.